All right. In that case, I'm calling the second Hood River City Budget Committee meeting to order. First agenda item is the approval of the meeting minutes from May 3rd of 23. Any additions, corrections, changes, any motions to accept them?
I will move, we accept the meeting minutes from May 3rd, 2023.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the meeting minutes. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Minutes approved. Next, yes.
I just want to acknowledge that budget member Graham is on Zoom, so
Yeah.
he's here. Oh, yeah, whether you see him on video or not,
I mean, you can
just let him know that he's here.
He's there.
He's present.
Okay. And do we know if he approved the minutes, how he voted?
I don't know.
You can hear us, we good? That's an A. All right. That's an A to that. Okay, minutes are approved again. First up is the general fund, the police program, police program.
Right. Chief Holstein is here, so we'll have a minute to come on up.
Ease into the idea of what general fund and all that good stuff. Now.
We did that last week.
Yeah, we're good.
Not struggling. Gonna get you.
Yeah. Guess I could set it up. Hit share screen first, Jen.
Yeah.
Make amendments.
Use the arrow, like use this. Yeah, I like the arrows, but we'll do that. Well, thank you for having me. We're actually talking today. This will be my 12th budget presentation. Many of you have met before, new members that previous new to the committee and new to council. Appreciate it. Grant, you've been here for many years, so we're pretty normal. So what I'm going to talk about is general fund. General fund is, as he had mentioned last week, it's a fund that's many emergency services, i.e. police, fire, parks. There's certain funds that come out of this one general fund. It's not dedicated to any one thing. It's allowed to be disseminated in different departments within the organization, i.e. the city of Hood River. So my fund, it starts at page 31. But we are initially going to go through the PowerPoint. So what I'm going to do first is just kind of let you know the past, what we've done in 2022-23 budget year. And then we'll go ahead and go forward if you guys have any questions about my numbers and any questions about budget itself. It's not too exciting when we get into numbers. So hopefully I can enlighten you a little bit with my PowerPoint. So here we go. So this will be my 2022, what we did in the past, to let you know kind of what the funding, what we're able to do within our community. So here's our mission statement. It hasn't changed. We're a proactive organization, and my goal is to reduce crime by being proactive and out there and looking. We're here to protect the lives of every citizen, whether you're here on vacation, whether you live here, or you just work here. And my biggest thing, as I've mentioned before, is even though we're in law enforcement and we enforce laws, I want it to be done with compassion. I want everybody to be treated like it could be their own relative, son, brother, or such. So I really have always said that, enforce from your heart. I said, you'll never get in trouble if you do something. It was because it was a good feeling to do, as long as it wasn't illegal to do. So I think people can justify, good thoughts and good reasons. So. And ultimately, we're here to hold ourselves accountable, and have standards of excellence and achievements for ourselves as well. So that hasn't changed. It's a philosophy that's through the organization. So here we go. Those of you who were on the budget committee last year, you approved one position for me. This is him. the 2022-23 budget, you were able to hire Officer Griffin. Austin was his first name. He went to school in Chenwood and went out of high school, played college ball. If you get to stand next to him, you'll say, yeah, that probably makes sense. And he is currently in the academy now. As we say, for law enforcement getting new employees, it takes about a year. So as of Friday of this week, he actually graduates from the police academy. We're really excited. So I'll go down Friday for his graduation. So that'll be a great thing because that won't necessarily put another person on the schedule, but it'll actually put him into a field training program where we can short term. We're hoping for, I think it's September, we'll actually get him on the road on his own. He was able to do a little bit prior to going to the academy. So with that higher position, we are back to where we were in 2018 as the last date of 15 patrol officers. Just wanted to get a little trend where we're at. Pretty stagnant. There were 12 for quite a while, then we bumped to 18. And today we're at 2023, we're at the 15 mark. So we're pretty excited to get back there. A little note on that. It'll feel like we've got a bunch of new employees. I think if you read my budget message, we've been down between 2 and 4 officers this last year. It's been struggling as far as dealing with the staffing level and then dealing with calls for service and still mandated training and vacations and sick leave and such. Kind of a little comparison, let you know, 2008, we had 15. We had 5,900 calls during that time. And 2022, we had 12,829 calls. So we have the same staffing levels we had at 08, but as far as our community is very low, and it also increases calls for service. When you say calls for service, it isn't always a criminal call. It can be anything from someone parked in front of my mailbox to, hey, the neighbor's dog is barking and I'm tired of hearing it at 10 o'clock at night. So it's a roundabout thing. When you say calls for service, I always tell people, don't think, wow, we've got a lot of crime coming in our community. It's all types of calls. Here's a little call trend from 2008 to 2022. Pre-COVID, as you can see in the orange line, and when it was declared a pandemic in 2020, we definitely dropped. People stayed home. People weren't doing things as much. We're slowly climbing out of that. We're getting back to where the 2019 numbers were. This last year, again, as I said, we had 12,829 calls for service. So it's slowly increasing. Report writing. I always put this in because we can have calls for service, but when we write a report, it's substance. It's something that either someone went to jail or it's something that criminally we have to continue to follow up on. So it really kind of shows a pattern of a little over 10%, probably 12% of what we're doing is actual stuff that actually is hands-on, required either the district attorney to move forward for prosecution or follow up for criminal cases and such. And it's kind of a side note, when we pull a case number and it's continued investigation, it's not multiple reports as we do it. It's one case number and then we just do, we call it supplemental reporting onto that one case. So it's not stacking numbers. Arrest. Here's our arrest trend. I looked at that, I thought, oh my gosh, we're up to 990 arrest types in our community. But you really look at from pre-COVID, we had 963. So we're really from the pre-COVID to today, our trend is probably not much different as far as a little bit more activity, a few more people visiting Hood River, but it's not scary to what it was like in 2020 where it was 783. But if you look pre-COVID, we're pretty consistent, small increase. Arrest types. I kind of like to let you know this variety, I pull them out, this kind of what's happening, what trends are occurring within our community. The one that probably highlights, the one I probably want to say is warrants the top. If you look at it, it's 250 for 2022. Substantial increase. Well, what happened during the pandemic period, most people didn't go to jail. Jails wouldn't take them due to the COVID issues. So we were citing and releasing all over the state of Oregon and such, Washington. So now that's catching up for those that have not went to jail, or not went to their court hearing and such. So that you'll definitely see a tick in that, I think, in Oregon overall and other states, just because of that fallback of not complying with the orders. Drug arrests, they're definitely sustaining for the last couple of years at 67, 68. So UIs. Again, when I looked at this, I was shocked the numbers increasing. But again, in 2018, we had 165, and where today we have 189. So small window. As far as it looked like it was increasing highly from the previous years. But again, the pandemic and such, things were closed down and people weren't going out and about. Drug arrests. They have sustained about 68, 67 in the last couple of years. As we all know, House Bill 110 passed in 2020 by the voters, decriminalizing user amounts of drugs, i.e. anything cocaine, 39 Oxycontin in your pocket, not a big deal. So that definitely dropped that number down. And then I wanted to show with the drugs, what's happening in our community. So I put a few pictures out that are overwhelmed, but I just thought it'd be good for you to see, kind of show and tell what the guys are actually on a car stop, what they're actually seeing. So this is your standard stop. This individual is arrested for 113 grams of methamphetamines to your left. As you'll see these patterns, drugs, scales, usually things to participate in, and guns are very common, in the stops, and packaging. There's another one, substantial amount of money. This one, fentanyl in the upper left. The blue, as some of you know, fentanyl no longer is the blue color. It looks like Skittles. They're kind of changing the way they're manufacturing it, kind of making it more enticing for everyone of all ages. So here's another one, a little bit of meth gun. We actually had the bomb squad come up, and I didn't hear exactly what that white thing. It has a fuse. You would think it's some kind of explosion. They come up and took it, but I never did hear exactly what it was at the time. So another one. Again, these are all proactive enforcement. These aren't called in. These aren't scenes that we've been doing. This is a traffic stop, and the officer does the extra minute of time just to kind of evaluate what's occurring in these vehicles. An interesting tool there. Again, standard scales, vials, money. Fentanyl at the top, individually packed. Usually those are like 40 per pack for sale. This one was a very good one. Not only guns, drugs, such. We ended up getting a lot of electronics and a lot of information that people were getting their ID stolen. So we were able to clear some ID thefts and some actual local thefts that were occurring with tracking the iPhones, and who were the car prowls, were the majority of those were phones. Again, there's your multicolor upper right, just kind of let you know what the colors are occurring. We've had a few of those where that's all they were, is the multi-skittle color. And then another gun with some methamphetamine. So there's another one, multi-drugs, money. And the final one, I kind of thought this was kind of a funny one. The upper right, that looks like an AR-15. If you look on the end of it, they've made that one to where that's the use to smoke it in. So it's kind of pretty, it's pretty cool. Very ingenious. So on this, I pulled these numbers or received these from the district attorney's office. So our new district attorney is very good about providing information to county commissioners of what's occurring within the organization, and she facilitates this to myself, and I think Abigail and a few other people locally. Kind of looks like what we're doing in our community as far as our small department being proactive. It's, I would say, fighting crime. Look at the staffing levels are in the blue. Calls to trials that she's been dealing with is in the gray. Just kind of look where we're at between other three agencies. She actually pulls these three agencies for comparison to what's occurring, because they all use her district attorney when it occurs in the community. So this is, she sent with this first quarter trend. We're above our last year's norm, 158 for the first quarter, first 3 months. This is one of those things that we've been talking about. She's wanting money to help fund their district attorney's office. I told her I would support her. The levy that occurred, one of the bullet points was supporting prosecution within the district attorney's office. She's still waiting for the money on that. So, but I said if she ever wanted to pound the pavement and have support on that, I would definitely do that with her. A little bit of our training. Here's some of the officers that will shop at the cop. Total training hours that we do get trained through the year, 1,417 hours. Of that was 1,351, and we're averaging about 90 hours a year for patrolmen for the year. So a little over 2 weeks. You know, that's everything from case law, use of force, required to shoot 4 times a year, proficiency and such like that. And a new thing that's occurred, is kind of, I want to say, not necessarily buzz, but a new thing that's, I'm old school, been doing it for almost 30 years. This wasn't offered to us. So health and welfare within an organization is huge. And I've seen it more with the younger people we hire, and those that are in the emergency services period. This is a great thing to offer local communities. So we actually, this last year, 2022, we were able to receive a grant through all the local law enforcement boards, Hood County, Hood City, Wasco County, Dallas, Intertribe. And now we're providing monthly and weekly trainings, different techniques for breathing. We're doing yoga for first responders and mental health exercises, like you say, yoga, meditation and such. And then the last one is pretty cool, that there's a local physician that's allowing free mental health professional care. And that's at a no appointment necessarily. You know, like the situation with the bridge, when our 3 guys rolled up to that, you know, we have one guy that hasn't even made probation yet. Life experience, we were able to, you know, hey, we've got these things available to you, you know, so it was a great thing. A couple of things that I've done with in-house organizations with health and welfare. We were able to get Stephanie Cohen. She is an outstanding psychologist. She writes books, able to get her locally. We did a regional training. We did it at the Hood River Fire Department in their community room, and I made everybody go to this, and that's not always the best thing to do. But the people that were probably the most stubborn actually came out of the class and said that was the most, you know, viable, important stuff I've done in a long time. So she's an amazing person for first responders, those that in first responder that she can really relate to, you know, the emergency service atmosphere. So it was great to hear. And that was dealing with the chronic stress and the trauma and the organizations of her jobs. So. And then finally, I've implemented a wellness program policy with there just to say, hey, I'm in for you. I'm willing to support you, whatever it takes. And that's partnered with Lexapol, which is a policy a company that assists us to develop policies that best practice and meet litigation purposes. So, and that encompasses, you know, holistically, you know, fitness, mental health, and overall wellness. So. And then on that, a little bit of our community outreach. We try, you know, at the staffing level makes it tough sometimes, but we try to hit everyone we potentially can. We had a great year hanging out with some of these kids and young people. This little bit, Scouts, Safety Fair we just had during the Easter, and Hanson's Bike Buddies. Those bikes every year we have a kind of a plethora of leftover bikes that no one claims. And it's great to find a nonprofit organization. If you know anybody, send it my way. We always want to know. Here's another one, Safety Halloween downtown. Upper right, we had 3 entrepreneurs that were selling cherries. They stopped by and purchased some. And then the bottom, the West Side School, we did a visitation talk there. Code enforcement and parking. This isn't like state statute. This is our ordinances within that. I think we talked about code enforcement. It's not too long ago. Parking enforcement. Citations have definitely gone down from what we saw in the previous 2019 and 2018. I kind of looked over on why is that occurring. I really believe most of this is occurring is our compliance is really good now that we have the pay by app. Before, people were willing to hope that no one didn't show up so they didn't have to run out of whether they're eating lunch or having their hair done. You know, the app actually notifies you that it's occurring. So our citations have gone down. That is funding. You know, so, you know, I don't know if in your future that we're looking to maybe increase that parking by a little bit, 25 cents, I think, in the near future. But, you know, talking to the parking enforcement Jennifer, she says, yeah, it used to be you could go every sidewalk and there were several violators, but now it takes, you know, several minutes to even find someone that is out of compliance. So, which is nice to hear because that's the whole name of the game. Parking enforcement, again, this is just down and dirty data, kind of let you know kind of what they're citing for out there. Expired meters, I know we always have to question that, and then overtime limit. Expired meters have definitely gone down. Well, that's the Duncan pay by quarter. Those they consider expired, where the ones by app is parked overtime. So that's how they decipher those two. So as we get rid of the Duncans, that expired meter will probably disappear. Code enforcement, I believe that last year I stated, our peak of COVID, a lot of people staying home, a lot of eyes and ears out there. So we had a major peak, constantly, weekly, people complaining about, you hate to say it, their neighbors, or the guy down the street or the gal down the street. So we had a major peak, but this year we're actually starting to stabilize back. If you look at 2019, 2018, we're pretty in line with our past code complaints are. To this last year, we had 199 or 204, excuse me, we clearance of 199. We still have 5 outstanding that still are being worked on. So our compliance rate is pretty good. And on that, I want to say thank you. And questions on that?
Anyone have any questions for Neil? Thanks, Chief.
Okay,
Chief, could you speak a moment about the,
we're going to go over my budget.
great,
Okay. So as you know, I did a little budget proposal here, a little written document. Some of that was up on the screen, but I didn't count all of it together. So what I'm looking for this year, as far as if you look at my numbers itself, pretty minimal. I didn't increase a whole lot. There's a couple of reasons. One, we've never really been at a staff level in the last couple of years to really know what is a safe number. The only one that really scares me is gasoline, because no one knows where that's going. But outside that, our numbers are pretty stable and in a pretty good place. The place I really did this year is I asked for an ad package. My ad package isn't a person. It's actually a position of change. So there'll be an existing full-time employee, and that person will actually go into a sergeant's position. That'll allow us to have 3 supervisors, we'll call them frontline supervisors. We had 3 in the past. We got away with it when I promoted a lieutenant years ago. And I just believe it's time to bring that back, 1 for liability, 2 for mental and health for the current 2 sergeants. Right now, there's 2 sergeants and all they do is work weekend nights, nothing else. So this sergeant, my goal is to put it on a week, it'll be a weekend and a day shift that allow them to transfer through. And then I don't have to worry about getting the phone call every weekend and saying, hey, we got a concern, what's the next step? We'll have some supervision there. So that was my big ask for the year, if you look at my budget. So I increased contract services because I knew that those that I contract aren't going to give me a buy for this year. So that was my biggest increase. So.
Anyone have any questions on the budget?
Just maybe comments, no questions on the budget. I think it's very, from my perspective, very incremental, and you had your 1 bump last year and great. And thank you for service delivery. We've been, from a waterfront perspective, just add a little small kind of advocation for you. We've had some issues over the last year, just heightened weird activity down there. And we've always found your service delivery to be outstanding and super responsive. Whenever there's a question, you guys have answers. So no questions from me on budget. Thank you for great service and outstanding community involvement.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We always appreciate that.
Yeah.
I would have anticipated more overtime given the staffing and the workload.
I'm pretty old school, but we were talking about this today. Kind of raised in old school is let's buckle down and how can we save and not spend the money if we don't have to. So our guys are incredible. They're willing to flex their shifts a little bit to make that work, and they're all for that to make sure it's for the coverage. There's times that I pull Saturdays. My lieutenant's salary pulls shifts. We just made it work. So and I was surprised that we weren't higher than what we were. Just even looking at the criminal caseload at the district attorney's office, those trials, you could sit there for 8 hours and absolutely not get to the stand until the next day. So we burn a lot of money just on wait time, unfortunately. And then even once you testify, they say you're not free to leave. We need you to tell if they say it again. So we were actually in great shape this year. I was impressed. So.
I was curious, what do you get for the $175,000 vehicle replacement charge, or is that funding for future? Because I know we've been allocating ahead of time.
Yeah, so I have a note here, so that actually is one for future vehicles. This year I didn't need any capital. My vehicle replacement wasn't asking for one this year. My vehicles are between 8 and 10, actually one's 15 years of rotation. I have two, as you've been in the, I don't know, I'm still in emergency service, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Firefighter, jealous. We have two vehicles for 2 years now. I've been waiting on vehicles, and I think everybody will say Public Works, Fire Department, state bidding. For some reason, we've been kind of last on the list. And these are generic bills. They're nothing fancy. They're not off the lot, so they're not carpeted and stuff like that. So I'm still, as far as capital, it's been pushed now. I have two vehicles that are continuing to be pushed forward. I had word from Diana, she's the fleet manager for Oregon at Aggression Forward, saying that there might be two available that someone has canceled on, just because people can't wait to find another avenue. So this year, as far as capital, 0, but as far as future vehicles, that's what that is for, is funding those future vehicles face forward. Yeah.
Joe, did you have a question?
Is it ever a point to add a 4th sergeant at some point? Like, I think health and wellness is really important if it's allows that for the extra police officer to have that as advantageous in the future, or
I think Joe, I think we get a staffing level increases totally. Right now, this will put us in a perfect position where weekdays me and I have a lieutenant that works weekdays. And then this will allow us to have a day shift weekend. So they'll have a sergeant during the weekend. And then we have a night sergeant Sunday through Wednesday. Then we have another night sergeant that works Wednesday through Saturday. So we've got that coverage where it's available, supervisors there at all times. As we grow, that may be a thing, but right now our shift overall schedule allows supervision for it. So it's a great thing. So
You talked a bit about facilities last year. Are you still okay? Seemed like you were making do.
I need some water. That's a tough subject. This is it's 2019 that we've talked about this. We were moving full steam ahead. It's a society, things have changed a little bit, the dynamics of law enforcement, what do people want to see in the nation, kind of filter, just slow that process down a little bit. And then, as I think I said before, we've done some space needs analysis, some land ideas. And then from there now, we wanted to partner with the county. We had a couple of outside agencies, some nonprofits that want to work alongside us. Now we've kind of looked to the county and say, hey, would you want to partner with us? Because they have a courthouse that is one of the oldest in the state of Oregon. They would like to improve. So we're kind of leaning on them to one, if they chose to do that, we had it. And that's, I guess I'll be blunt here, it's recorded. We really hadn't, I've heard no word for over a year and a half, probably 2 years of, yay or nay, what that is gonna be like, or even offer to partner with us, or they want to do it. I know they're financially, they've got a levy that they're running off of. And that we were looking at a 13 to 15,000 square foot building. So if that ventured out, that thing is 80,000 plus square feet. So it's a big bite of the apple if that happens. So this will be I believe I said 4th time that we went out for the idea of a police department in my career. I worked for the sheriff's office before, we're here. And it's kind of, I've told her the other day I'm tired because we push, and now it just kind of settles out. And so I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever will happens, it happens. That's where I'm at right now. So, is the facility up to standards? We definitely did. If you ever want to go to tour, we definitely did. So, there's different ideas we're thinking about. If this doesn't move forward, we're looking at ways to maybe do some remodel, restructure, something like that. So it's definitely not off our minds, because Abigail and I talked about it. It's just the direction. There's not a lot of steam right now, I guess you would say. Thank you for asking.
Are there any activities that are a drain on your time or resources that are possible to be changed or fixed, so it's not so much a drain on your time resources.
As far as the department overall, you know, I wouldn't say no. You know, our biggest in the summertime is we call it the hot dog call. You know, it's the hot dog in the car. But you know, we've got a small contract with the county, so when they're available, they do take a little bit of that because that takes a lot of time. We're not only dealing with the animal in the vehicle, we still have to take it out to Odell, you know, impound it, log all the information and drive back. But you know, we do have a pretty good partnership now with that, where when she's available, it's serviced, but it's 40 hours a work week, so substantial time that there's no service other than that. Yeah, it's just kind of part of our job. Buck up, let's do it. So.
Any other questions for you?
I got a question. So for the fleet issue,
Yes.
you know, is there something that we can do? I mean, it seems nobody wants to be at the bottom of the pile, right? Yeah. I guess somebody has to be at the bottom of the pile. But personally, I prefer it wouldn't be us.
Yeah, you know, the request for vehicles and such isn't based on, you know, size of department or anything like that. It's kind of a first come, first serve. Am I assuming some of those big agencies are probably, when you're ordering 25, 30 cars like a Portland Bureaus, they're probably getting that service above us. The answer we always get is, you know, the manufacturer. You know, that's the number one answer, the manufacturer. It was chips for a while, then it was employees for a while. You know, they're still providing vehicles on the lots for private citizens that we kind of joke in our world, it's because state bid is much cheaper than a public purchase. And they're making probably more money than they ever have off a new car or a used car. So, you know, if you're looking at the marketing world, you know, where are you going to fund it? You know, they're there to make money. So you can kind of see both sides of it.
So with respect to the disparity in the kind of the arrests, criminal cases dealt per capita by the different agencies in the county, why do you think that is? I mean, is it a responsibility thing?
You know, it's proactive enforcement. It's 100% what it is. It's those, we don't have a lazy guy in our department. Seriously, I couldn't ask for, I shouldn't say this. I mean, I've been able to retire for several years, but these guys are incredible guys and it's fun to work with. We're a family and they just want to work. They want to get out there and do stuff. They're not shy away from things. If they see stuff, they look above and beyond the norm. Whether it's a traffic crash, you're looking at dealing with a crash, but you're also looking at is there impaired? Is there a drunk driver? You know, so we've got some incredible people that understand impaired drivers. You know, which that also increases those numbers up and they can see it. So very good. And you know, it's not just alcohol anymore. You know, we're very common now to get the cannabis DUI is really common in our community now. So yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is fire. Chief.
Let's go.
So
you always say.
And this one starts on page 38 of our booklets.
You can.
All right, so fire. My name is Leonard Namian. I haven't met you before. I've been with the city now almost 7 years, so can't compete with Neil. This is 6 presentations. I have no idea. I'll count eventually. I don't have all the fancy slides. I keep telling myself year after year, I'm gonna have to keep up with Neil. Here we go, calendar. All right, so tonight, just a few things we'll talk about. I won't go into all the stuff we do with fancy pictures like I mentioned, but I will talk about services and outcomes. I'll talk about the budget requests for next year. And then more importantly, I'll talk about some of our future challenges. Okay. So services, just as a reminder what we do. I know it's Hood River Fire Department or Hood River Fire and EMS, but we do fire and EMS. In the map, the little blue squiggly line towards the river, that's the city of Hood River. But blown out in the yellow-ish green that you see on your screen, that is our Hood River County ASA or ambulance service area. And then off to the right, looks like a blue little sliver, that's Wasco County ASA 1, which we protect. So that's Mosier and South Mosier. So in total, that's about 145 square miles. So it does encompass the city, portions of Hood River County and Wasco County ASA. So some of you might have heard in the past where I talk about where the center of the hub or the hub of the wheel of the gorge. We're the only paid 24/7, 365 fire department between Gresham and the Dalles. But ironically, we're also the backup for across the river in the state of Washington. So we go to Trout Lake, we go Bingen, White Salmon, we go beyond that sometimes if needed. So it's not, we just don't run calls in the river or the city of 3 square miles. So we're very busy running those calls, and we'll go through some of that here in just a little. So our services, so our staffing overall, we have 15 firefighters, but we will keep a minimum of 4 per day. Why 4? And so we can run 2 medical calls back to back. So we need 2 people in an ambulance, 2 times 2 is 4. So there we go. So we have 5, which allows 1 person to take the day off. And here's a little historical call volume from 2020 on. So far this year in 2023, we're up to 616 calls, which will put us just nearly over 2,000. So we're increasing year after year. But more importantly, what's driving this is our inter-facility transports. So we take patients from the city of Hood River at the hospital. We take them all over the Portland metro area, including Newburgh, Hillsborough, and beyond. So wherever the doctor wants to bring a patient for care. So that's our biggest stressor for workload. As you can see in 2022, 14.3% of our calls were transfers. And so far this year, 18.2% of our calls were transfers. So that'll be our driver for. You might be asked questions if I'm talking too fast. Here's some of the things we've been working on. So you might have seen this slide in previous presentations. We have a lot of new buildings coming up in Hood River. And there was a time we would draw all our maps on paper. And so now we utilize GIS. We put important fire features. It's just literally dragging little symbols on satellite image. We don't necessarily have drawings of every single building. Gary's familiar with this technology. And so all the new buildings we're doing that for, and that's improving all our knowledge of the buildings. It's hard for us to get in all these buildings with the medical calls that are occurring. Records management system. So 2 years ago, we switched over to a different reporting software. What that provided us was the use of iPads to capture data in the field. The big important part of that is it reduces our time that we're at the station doing reports. So we're able to scan driver's licenses, grab data off our heart monitors, everything is shipped cleanly to the hospital, and a nice professional package, and more importantly, save at least an hour per call doing reports. But the difficulty we're having is still is with our dispatch center. So our data and analytics is really difficult to get from a dispatch center that's using, I'll call it Minecraft type software. It's old, it doesn't provide great data, and we can't ask questions to provide quality answers. So for those on council, that's our biggest frustration. For those on the budget committee, when you want good data, we have to have good data for good analytics to provide that information. So we need that for good decision.
Is that the county 911?
Correct, it's the CAD system and they're working on, Neil can talk about this too, they're working on replacing it. So the question is how much, who pays, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot that goes into it. Outcomes for this year, in this current fiscal year, we purchased a new ambulance. It's different than our other 2 in the fact that it runs on gasoline, not diesel. So we're in hopes that it gets better mileage. I might have mentioned it on the freeway quite a bit. So the medic, we went in 2021 in November for approval, and it took us a year to get it. So like a police vehicle, the biggest delay honestly was a chassis. The box was easy to build. We were literally waiting for the driver's compartment and the wheels pulled up. So it took 9 months or so to get that. And at that time, that seemed pretty quick because now the vehicles are taking longer and longer. And coincidentally, the new engine we purchased, we went into an agreement 18 months ago, and we're still another 18 months out. And it got us in the queue and at cheaper steel prices for firing. So it's a crazy world right now for getting things like this done, where it normally would have taken 18 months. Now it's taking 36 or 40 or longer at a crazy cost. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about this vehicle and the cutting edge piece, and then what happened to the last?
Last ambulance, I'll say we used Public Works is using a different vendor system to announce things that we're surplusing. So we grossed 45,000 more, 45,000 more than we would have normally gotten for it. So that helps offset overall cities capital replacement. So this ambulance, so COVID, remember, we had all these fancy things. We use electronic defoggers, crazy little portable light systems. Crews would spend an hour after almost every call wiping everything down, understandably. In the back of this ambulance, there is a UV light system and a high-speed filtration system. It's, for now, the cutting edge of patient care cleanliness in the back of that ambulance. So it's actually pretty good. And I didn't mention it's gasoline. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, sorry I didn't bring it here for show and tell. That's the newest in medic units here. Workout equipment. So last year you guys approved workout equipment. That was purchased, and so we do have a workout room where staff does work out and use those part of the health and wellness part that Chief Holstein was mentioning. So those are the actual two pieces of equipment, not the actual pictures, but from the catalog, but that's the two things purchased. And then I kept this picture here from last year. COVID, it hasn't gone away. People are still getting it, staff still get sick. And we run on these calls all the time. So we're still working on gathering PPE and making sure crews are safe. All our equipment's clean and we're not providing contamination from one patient to another as we go call. So that's just a reminder of staff still dealing with this on a pretty routine basis. So budget requests. So if you remember in November, for those on council then, I came to the council asking for permission to write a letter for the grant. Spent a good amount of time writing the grant. We were supposed to find out in December, then January, and February, March, and April. And we just found out last week that we got the grant. So $384,000, that's a matching grant. One of 33 organizations in the state of Oregon that got it. So I'm happy. Very happy. So we have a little bit of a lift to do to talk about it. I can go into more detail if you want, but the goal is it'll be a 40-hour position, which is new to the city. I would love to add one per shift, but this one is a daytime firefighter position to help address the workload during the day. So that's the big change. So I would have talked about the cost of the city and the presentation, but this is the why. We do have the same staffing numbers since 2003, even though we had a dip and a rehire, we're still at 2003 levels minus the fire marshal. So our call volume, just like the police department, has gone crazy. Most of it for us is driven through the interfacility transfers, since the hospital here is more like the hub of patient healthcare. And so they ship everything to Portland for more advanced care. So as we see our populations increase, our call volumes increased, and more importantly, those interfacility transfers have gone through the roof. So they continue to be our big driver. So ironically, today I met with the doctor, the CEO of the hospital, to talk about some of that stuff for ways to help offload some of our workload, look at regional partners, and try to do some things more creative. So if you have questions on that one?
On the transfers, Chief, I know that, if it's my mother, we want the transfer to happen instantly, but is there some negotiation like, hey, we need to send somebody to Portland, could you do it in the morning? Well, we'd rather go to, how does those conversations?
We presently have a priority system, so if you have a heart attack and need STEMI, or you've had a stroke, or you're a trauma patient, need advanced care, we call that a priority 1. And then all the way to a priority 4, where it's like a local transport, where someone just needs to go home from the hospital to our community. Each one of those has a time requirement. So priority 1, there's no waiting. Priority 2 is 45 minutes. As you can see, as the priorities get less, the care, we can twice us sometimes. Usually that helps us because we're running multiple calls, and it buys crews time to gather, transfer crew, that sort of thing. So it's a conversation with a supervising nurse as to the patient destination, and then we can use things like LifeFlight. If LifeFlight cannot fly, because oftentimes they can't because of weather, we can use their ground crew, because we'll take patients that are on ventilators or elaborate drips that a paramedic normally would never give. We'll use all sorts of things to leverage that to keep our staff here in the city. So that's how the conversation goes. And then if it's after hours, so say after 8 o'clock or so, anyway, we typically say no to everything but those most critical patients, only because we've been running all day. It's not safe for us to run at night, often, unless it's critical, or worse during weather or red flag when we need to be around for fire conditions. So it's a balance, and that's what the meeting is about today, honestly, is us having that conversation.
Thanks.
Online with that, like how close are we to having it make sense for the city to hire like a couple more people to have another ambulance crew available? Like, because obviously we're getting paid for interfacility transports.
Yeah, so part of that's a product of collection rate, right? So we can bill people $1 million for a transfer, but a lot of people with insurance, right? There's either a fixed rate or a Medicare. It just depends on the payment side. So what I did not know when I worked with you before was how that side worked, and that's a giant morass of financial nightmare. Just because it's insurance companies, it's Medicare, so it's federal government, it's reimbursement schedule. It is crazy how much that stuff is. Whereas we do get additional money through GEMT, which that term you're familiar with, it's ground emergency medical transport. It just has to do with Medicare reimbursement for the gap that we're not getting. Because we can't charge, say, $2,000 and collect $500 every time. If this was a business, we would be out of business. So the state has a funding mechanism through a reimbursement program that we get some money back to. But in that long discussion, right, unlike fire district, the city's general fund, which everyone's talking about, right? My dollars and the police chief's dollars and the parks dollars and the planning department's dollars are all in the pot. So there's competing priorities. It isn't always about fire, as much as my heart would say that. But I would love to see a police station, right? I would advocate for that all day long. But do I want 3 extra people? I don't know if that's the Band-Aid fix, to be honest. I mean, do we use it? Sure. I don't think that's the fix. There's a larger system wrong. Much more for the budget committee to talk about. All right, so the next one, Medicare audit, $35,000. So why that's important is that contract's already been signed, and it's not a, hey, we do this every single year. We won the lottery. So I actually bought myself a ton of workload by having to work through a federal Medicare audit. So the $35,000 is to hire a third-party service to help manage all the federal paperwork. It's the same group of people we use for the GEMT, which I just mentioned previously. It's PCGS group, so they do a lot of these things, and they have a separate group that do these Medicare audits. I didn't know this either. So it's a lot of work to gather all the data and all those analytics that I just mentioned previously. It's difficult to get from a dispatch center, so I gotta get all that data and analytics. So that's the Medicare audit. So more to come on that, but it starts from each by one. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
What's the expected outcome of the audit?
The outcome is to make sure that we're not billing inappropriately for patients that receive Medicare.
Okay.
And more importantly, that we're meeting time requirements, that our staff is trained appropriately, our billing company that we utilize is billing appropriately.
Okay.
There's a lot more probably to it than I really know. At the moment, honestly, it's about call volume and call types and patient billing types.
Okay, so it's auditing your service delivery and some plumbing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully not too much. Lucas device. So has anyone ever heard of this before? Yeah, one person. That's strange.
Gary told me about it last week.
So the Lucas device for us, so it's an external CPR deliverer. So we often go on calls in the county where other staff may not be there. This literally frees up a firefighter or a volunteer that's doing CPR, or multiple career employees or volunteers doing CPR. Provides quality CPR that's measurable, consistent, helps us deliver the medications quicker. If we're having difficulty finding an IV site, magically when you're doing good CPR, the veins come up. So we can start an IV and deliver drugs. There's a lot more to it. I personally never used it. I know Gary, where he works, they have them. The goal for us is to get this. The goal is for us to work through the county for the others, ALS providers and some other providers to also get the same device. So it's not just we're all by ourselves. But this will not be on every ambulance. It's just one device at that cost. It'll be on a vehicle that can chase down every ambulance that will go on this call type to use it. So those are my big three requests: CPR device, an audit, and a little bit of matching money for the grant that I received last week.
I'll just say, I just started working with a place with the Lucas device like 6 months ago, and it's amazing. And especially with your staffing levels, like, I mean, I used to have a ton of people, but it still makes a huge difference because it frees people up. And we've had good results from it, and it allows you to continue doing CPR as you put them on a gurney, as you put them in the back of the rig. And those are times when CPR is not that effective, but that time it is. And I've firsthand seen the results. It's really been impressive to me.
All right, some challenges. So I already talked about interfacility transfers. I would say this will be a topic at every single budget committee. It will be a topic. It's been a topic since the very first day I started. That's what staff talked about, what they've had for challenges. It'll probably be a topic. So regionally, it's a hospital issue, and my best correlation is like the three hospitals kind of in the gorge, the Dalles across the river from us here locally. They're owned by three different places, right? So I even brought that up as an example. They're three silos of healthcare, right? They don't work together. They work in a silo. So we have 5 fire departments, but we have one EMS system, and we try to work together in 3 different ALS provider silos. So we're doing our best to work better together. We've taken tons of steps to do it. Interfacilities is one big challenge, and trying to use these other partners to sort of help us when we can. So I'll say that's one of the big challenges. We do average over 1 a day, and the big part is those take quite a lot of time, and that's the transport to Portland, handing off the patient, bringing it back to Portland or to Hood River, and then cleaning up. So what that really drives down for you guys is 5 hours every single day. There's only 2 firefighters in the city. Now it's augmented by volunteers and other paid staff Monday through Friday and other departments, sure, but if you think we have 4 every single day in the city, that's just some crazy stats.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Can you raise prices? Like, why can't you charge more? I mean, you're getting paid for this, but clearly like not enough for the amount of drain this has on your department. Are you able to charge more to be able to justify some more support to be able to provide that service?
As I mentioned earlier, we could charge $1 million a transfer.
Yeah, sure.
Insurance only pays so much. Where we do make money, frankly, is the mileage, right? So we're driving further. That's mileage. That's a reimbursable expense. So that's on top of the base charge, not to get into the absolute details. Is it a lost leader per se? Yes and no. It pays 3 times more than a 911 call on average. Just you look at backwards, just kind of have an idea, like if you're running this as a business, it's a private business sense. It has ramifications definitely for the city. Could we hire 2 paramedics that run these during the day? Paramedic only, they just run. We just don't have the call volume to justify adding 6 more people.
Right. So you're in that weird, you're in kind of the weird spot.
Yeah, and this one day position is kind of trying to kill multiple things, right, with one person, trying to address our call volume during the day, the transfers that hit during the day. I might have not mentioned, because like I said, I just had a several hour conversation just not long ago. We have EMS volunteers that we've tried different stones. We keep turning things over and trying to be creative, and we're all keep doing that. Right, so it's just the nature of the community growing. This hospital is a feeder hospital. They don't staff to a place where they could, but they don't have the patient count to do that either, right? So we're all in this like nebulous staffing level to do the right thing. But in the end, it's about the patient, and we're trying to provide the best patient care and the most better and doing the best service we can to the community in that regard. But also keep what we can in the city to do 911 calls or God forbid a fire. So it's one of these balances things.
Will that new person allow you to have 3 people in the city while they're here essentially? So if there is fire, then you're.
Yep. Okay. It literally just adds another body, keeps one additional person. So, I mean, in the summer, right, the city will swell, we'll have people on trail systems. This biking trail system coming into this town will just be another feeder for more visitors, right? So our call volume just continues to increase as the city gets more popular. And we could add seasonal staffing for some of that, but as you guys have lived here a long time, the season now is January through December, right? It's not just the summer or the little bit of a break before ski season. It's literally all year. So we're trying our best to do it and do it in balance with the priorities of the city.
I've heard the sheriff explain the workload of the national forest and meadows and all that. I noticed you don't mention that.
That's their deal. There was a time when we still do it, and because we're public, right? So we'll take a 4-wheel drive vehicle to the trail system. We'll send our entire staff to Post Canyon, and we'll send 3 people up the trail and leave one back in an ambulance. And we'll have a sheriff's office or a fire district or other people come and help. 10 years ago, that was not an issue. It's that one call takes a couple hours. Chances are, right, the luck of a roll of dice, nothing else is happening. Something happens all the time. And so we have to have something back to take care of those emergencies that happen. So you can't just empty your entire station for someone that has a broken clavicle on a trail system 4 miles up. They need medicine, yes, to take care of the pain. They need help off the truck for sure. But the sheriff's office is tasked with that. So Sheriff English, we've had that meeting to talk about some of that, and it's always going to be a challenge, right? It's not the city, but the county becomes popular.
Great, thank you.
Fire marshal position. This is more of our workload, mainly for me. So I do both jobs, and we do lots of building. So in a minute, you'll hear from the planning department, right, about all the development. That's part of my job too. So it's a big workload to balance all these things. And honestly, I've been without a number 2 person my entire time I've been here. So is that a future challenge? It may be for recruitment for my replacement in that time. It's just food for thought. Succession planning. So we have 1 captain and 1 engineer paramedic eligible to retire. So we're working on some succession planning on promotional opportunities and getting people ready for the next role. But in the next 3 years, I got 2 more captains. So all 3 captains in 3 years will be gone, and then 1 additional lieutenant. So a lot of change will be happening in this department. So kind of like Chief Olstey's department, hiring a lot of people will be that same, plus a lot of new people in a lot of new positions. So we're working on leadership training, and we're working on a lot of other things to get people ready that have interest to make sure that they're ready for when that.
I meant to ask this for the police chief also. How are we doing on gender equity?
That is a great question. We have done outreach. So Lieutenant Ian was on light duty. He did a job fair at a local paramedic program. So he was there representing River Fire. He's a representative class. We've had lots of female interns. The truth is, when it comes to the hiring process we have, go straight down the list, take the top 10 people to interview, maybe 8 or 7. If they're qualified, they're getting interviewed. There's hard for me to reach, but this last testing process, like all fire departments, with paramedic school's being shut down for a couple of years, the testing pool's small. So as much as we would like to do that, it's very difficult. So Gary can speak to that a lot more too, but we do our best. So we do ridiculously well at our internship program. It's just the timing doesn't work for some of those interns for us to hire.
Thank you.
So with that, any questions?
With turnover, you know, Neil Scott, it takes a year to get folks out on the street on their own. What's the time frame for new firefighters or EMS folks getting out on the?
I would say on the police side, they do a really good job of sending everyone to one type of a police academy, so everyone comes out kind of the same. Fire's completely different. And when we hire someone, we essentially hire what they call a lateral. So they come in with this piece of paper, this piece of paper, this piece of paper. So that also limits the pool of people that have those papers. So only because we don't have an academy, we don't have a formalized process to do that. And then for us to wait for an opening at DPSST on the fire side, it's probably longer than what the police side has. So they do have that option, they just don't do it that often. And when they do have it, it's pool. So we had an engineer or a new employee that we teach to drive a fire engine and pump. He was a new hire. We sent him to Gresham because they had a large engineer academy. So we followed with getting outside of the homeschool world and sent them to Gresham to spend a couple weeks there. So that was a good experiment for us. And I think we'll do that some more probably with them as well as the Columbia Fire Medals.
But it's a faster turnaround
For us, yes, it's still 12 months, but yeah, the minute they're hired, they're on an ambulance. They're typically shadowing for a little bit. And then once they're cleared for that one vehicle, they're good to go with another person. Okay. Yeah. A little bit quicker, but it's a different process for sure.
Thinking back to the map you showed earlier, you mentioned in the past, you know, we're sort of surrounded by, you know, fire departments that are largely volunteer based, and volunteerism is, you know, across the country kind of declining, et cetera. Can you just kind of summarize what that does to the budget and, you know, how to combat that sort of trend? If there's anything to be said about that, I know that's something that you're working on, et cetera.
I would say that's a great question. I don't want to say it impacts the budget unless I might have to think about that a little bit more. What that means for us, if we don't want to call outside the city limits in another fire district that's mainly volunteer, mind you, they have paid staff during the day. So nights, weekends, harvest, anything, I'll say common times where it's hard to find a volunteer to go on calls. We'll end up having to send staff from the city to go assist at times, not all the time, sometimes. If we're not able to get enough people to either help, say, take someone down from the second floor to the ambulance, it takes more than just 2 people to do it safely. We'll send staff from the city to do that. So there's some impact, I guess, but budget wise, we're still there on the clock. We might have to think about that a little bit more. There's a budget, nothing that jumps right out at me.
Thanks.
If the county updates their 911 system, how much would that impact your work? Would it impact our transfers and that sort of thing?
It won't impact our workload or transfers. Actually, the 911 center is integral in the communication.
Would it make the work easier? Would it make the transfer process easier? Any of that sort of thing? The audit process after I spend 35 grand on? Yeah,
the analytics that we have to provide some things. So I would say as a perfect example would be ISO rating. So for the fire department, you get graded on staffing levels, how you train, fire hydrant maintenance programs. There's a long list. Right when I got here, we were graded from an ISO 5 to a 3. And that was some of the work that my predecessor had done when we did the regrade when I was brought on board. But we're really close to being a 2. And what that really means for those that own businesses is commercial insurance gets cheaper. So as your ISO rating gets closer to the number 1, insurance gets cheaper for definitely for commercial, it impacts some residential. The data analytics side helps prove, right, how long it takes us to get on calls, how long it takes us to get to calls. There's a whole other part of the fire world that measures intervals. So the 911 system is part of that interval. How fast do they answer a call? How fast do they process a call? And how fast do they kick the call out? Those are 3 different time hacks that I would say are hard pressed if you want to get that answer today. But the newer CAD system, right? It's just newer. It's kind of like an iPhone. They're on an iPhone 3 or 2, right? So Kevin can appreciate this. The system they have now is really old and it's hard to maintain, and they have a lot of work orders, and I'm asking a lot of the system. We can't do simple things like a cab flag. We can't say that this address or this address has a dangerous person or dangerous thing, or police says it's a dangerous thing and we happen to go there on a medical call and they think we look like a police officer. We don't know they know, but we don't. So there's safety aspects that and analytics and things like that. But is it a budgetary hit? To answer your question, sort of, it will be a budget request at some point, but the impact of the fire department's budget will be a little bit less since we've never paid this work.
And then I asked the question, assuming it gets funded. That's not necessarily the case. That was just how I phrased the question. If we qualify to be a level 2 versus level 3, how much would that change our community-wide insurance coverage? You know, offhand what that rate, how much that rate would drop? Because that would be a massive public benefit, I would think.
I know I just opened a can of worms with that statement. I would say I don't know. I know that there was, and this is a guess, I want to say it's 10% per jump, and we're really close. And to be honest with you, 2 of those things I talked about, pre-fire planning, which we're using our GIS system to do and updating all those maps, staffing. So our pre-fire plan and staffing were our 2 lowest grades. So I'll say coincidentally, I'm trying to do those things too. So I want to prepare our fire department and the community for a regrade at some point when I believe those things have all been addressed, so we can prove to the insurance person that comes up to do the grading that we're deserving of a 2, not a 3. Okay, we're close.
Yeah, and I have a separate question more for Chris. For the person that we have the grant for, the out years that grant funding goes down the slope. Is it worked into our future budgets were forecasted out? Is that we the city would be taking on that position 100% 4 years?
Yeah, so the forecast we do is a 3-year forecast. The way the grant is structured is it's a 3-year subsidy, right? So it is supposed to be 90% first year, right? 75% the second year, 50% the third year. So as far as the 3-year, and then there's the 4th year, right, where it's 100% for the city. So our 3-year forecast covers the subsidized years, right? So it's you know, the 4th year would be unsubsidized. The other thing that is a little bit different that we just learned last week is that the budget currently assumes the first year subsidy in this budget year, right? We just learned last week that it's a lump sum grant. So that's going to change the budget in that the full lump sum will be in, well, it'll change the numbers you see, right? And that the full lump sum will be in this year's budget, right? And so they want to just, you know, so
Collecting it all now, allocating it later. Yeah. Pumps up the numbers for this year, but we have more expense in the future. Just wanted to make sure that we're all cognizant of that future liability that we would all assume to be paying after year old.
But to be clear, the payroll number that's in the budget is the full salary.
Yeah.
Right? So the subsidy is the revenue, right? And then what's in the salary is unsubsidized wages.
Yes. Yep. I understand. Anyone else have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you guys for your time.
Congrats on the grant.
All right, everybody taking a break. So we're taking a break for 5 minutes.
Terminator.
Yeah.
And I think that there's.
BC. That's
All right. Let's resume with the planning and building permits. All yours.
As you know, or may not know, my name is Dustin Nelson. I'm the Director of Planning and Zoning. A quick department overview. Here. Lancer. The role and services, planning department administers your city's comp plan, primarily through the zoning code and land division. We have 3 staffers, which are really made up of 2.5 technical planners and a half called paraprofessional who handles primarily front of house services, not particularly technical reviews, but it is really the anchor and incredibly important in terms of customer interface. Primarily dedicated to the administration of short-term rentals. On the budget side, and operation, planning makes up approximately 5.4% of your general fund. And which we get a lot of face time and a lot of seat time with you, but really on the books, we are not particularly budget heavy. I don't think we have a car. So we haven't been looking for any vehicles. We have no capital. We build nothing, we purchase nothing. The budget is approximately 86% based around the staff and consulting services that we use to supplement for special projects. Planning really here is one of the 3 legs of development along with the building and engineering department. And we're the first stop in the development process, which is typically the most discretionary, most controversial, and most public facing. And it is aptly named the entitlement process. So, we deal a lot with entitlement. From the planning department roles and services, we are typically the lead agency in your housing efforts, short-term rental licensing. We administer the transportation system plan. We are project support for urban renewal, especially in Heights. On behalf of your agency, we really anchor commercial development, economic opportunities analysis with staff for historic preservation, your national hazard resource mitigation, resource planning, recycling, hazardous waste material, annexations, and subdivisions. That's the top what we do. Again, 5% of your budget dedicated to that. However, our look back for 2023, we had 67 land use applications. That's the highest number since the recession 2007. So the good thing is it's been pretty, it seems to be, we're busy, but that's low key, and that's the way I like it. It means these cases are handled professionally. Really, to the best of our ability, we keep them out of the appeal process and from becoming political whenever possible. The major change in 2023 or 22-23 is that the planning department assumed administration over the city's building department after a prolonged absence of public works director, and then leave of the deputy city manager. I became the overseer of that department, taking on another aspect of the development process. And it brought with it 3 full-time equivalent plus contract for services with Hood River County, who handles our planning review inspections today. Building is a restricted fund, not really part of the general fund, so monies and revenues coming in and outflowing are restricted to that fund. It's authorized under the Department of Consumer and Business Services. We're responsible for administering the state's building program. And when I say the state's building program, the state is very serious that both in planning and building, it is not your local program. You are handling the state's program, and it's your local. There's a very important hierarchy that they love to maintain. So your building budget is on page 94 and 96. Again, also ironically, it is, or commonly, it is also 86% staff heavy.
The only really outlying service you'll see in there is contract services. That money that it goes straight to the other county for the payment of this third party. The goals for building for 23, and this being my first budget year with the building, will be to stabilize some of the expenditures, demystify some of the billing that I see, refill our vacancies. We've had a building official locally for about 4 months, and that really gives a glimpse of some of the opportunities we have to provide some services locally. And we're looking to right size some of our revenues and fees, really for cost recovery and building some reserves. Council got to see a glimpse of, as we discussed, building fees. Those fees haven't been updated since 2009. It's the first year that I brought those forth to look at, again, really updating those to be commensurate with the cost that is incurred by the city to handle this program. Essentially, we lose money through our building permit program every single year. Recognizing that trend and reversing it and try to begin to assume a little better cost recovery from the trend on that is important for us. Yeah.
Are you advancing slides?
Not yet.
Not advancing before.
No.
I see you clicking. And then
Yeah, I'm clicking. I have my cheat sheet behind here.
Got it.
I don't have all the notes. There's no glamour and there's no pirate Jack Sparrow gun. This is just planning. But you have a window in your office. I do. Yeah, please, two. I'm the one who's gonna leave not build a police department. Don't put me down there. 'Cause that's where I go. That's where I'm gonna go. If Neil ever gets to move out. You're gonna set me down. Also, we need to revise our IGA with the county services. I think that's an important client relationship and expectation that I intend to do in the next fiscal year. It's something that's taken some time. I need to have some seat time with some first person observation, how that relationship works, and how do we actually best utilize the county as our agent out there in the field. 2024-23 work plan projects. I love to mention that. Although planning is only 5% of your general fund, it does touch and really take some pretty significant roles in 5 of your 6 top critical projects in your work plan. So 780 Rand Road, the affordable housing project that you partnered in. Kevin has been dedicated to that for the past 2 years. Hopefully we see some funding results of that in August. West Side Urban Renewal District formation, led that and we play a technical role in that. FEMA floodplain risk map update. That is something that FEMA is coming to town and they're going to remap the floodplain, whether you like it or not. And we need to be active in understanding the implications of that and really help trying to best manage the outcomes of that and making sure that our community understands the implications and has opportunity to self-help. Heights Streetscape Phase 3. In your critical plan list, we're getting into the final preparation of the preferred design, and that's my project to manage. Development code audit is actually a project from last year. I lost my project manager and staff turnover. So that is still budgeted this year. We started that project and it is really kind of a process improvement. If we're going to have limited resources and limited staff, we better be working smarter. And really our code is dated and has a lot of compliance issues. It's difficult to use for the staff. It's difficult to use for the customers. And it needs it's really the same code as we've had since the 80s with some updates. It's going to be important to get out from that. Your significant projects, the building review process and improvement, that is a combination of the code audit as well as the building program specialist that I'm looking to help really make that IGA and working with the county run smoother. And your other projects, the state highway trail, ODOT bringing the historic Columbia River Highway to town. We have worked with them with Cascade Avenue, as well as some of the park implications of that project coming to a city near you.
And then finally, food card licenses, which we heard earlier in the year, and we plan to do so working in some updates with both our parklet program and food cards to bring them in the modern. Trends, outlooks, and challenges. This one I talked about last year. Where Swin River, in terms of from the planning department, still continues to be an attractive place for investment. Our limited land supply still continues to have impacts on site developments and the complexity of entitlements. Urban renewal is really starting to become a major player in terms of the ability to work in critical infrastructure, especially along Cascade. Complications, access to capital for private development, especially on our larger projects that we've entitled in past years for multifamily, for commercial, is really complicating and making a lot of these private investments additionally challenged. On the organization side, our ability to sustain, retain, and attract staff with our own limited housing opportunities is critical. I have vacancies in both planning and building that we've advertised and have not filled. So our ability to attract and retain staff is really a huge obstacle of moving this organization forward, hence money going to contract services. I hope to fill those this year. I also know I'm going to lose staff because we've grown them. We've grown staff that go to law school, that aspire to greatness, and we cannot grow them vertically within the organization. So consequences of growing up your staff and getting talent is that there's a ceiling. They will move on and to great things. So we're excited that we provide that opportunity. I wish them well, and I wish I could have the opportunity to fill that void. So that's some real serious consequences of 23. I will miss them, and we'll come back with less hair. Really, that's what we're looking at in terms of planning. I'm going to go back to 5% of your budget. 5 to 6 critical projects fall into the staff. These folks work hard. It's a stressful environment. We deal with really emotional, high capital situations, and I think that's they may not have the hero's status in terms of Christmas mothers, but they do a lot of work, and they do a lot of work for the city and take a lot of bruises, and I don't always often as champions, but it's important. It's an important job, and they believe in it, and that's what keeps us going. Any questions?
Who handles your recruiting? You do that yourself?
We do a combination. We'll do our in-house recruiting for local staff, but then we do outside recruiting through just we have various vendors. So I couldn't name them. Jensen Strategies has been one.
Rectals.
So
Just a little surprised in this kind of community that you have
me too.
more difficulty than most.
It's I think that so I lost somebody because I landed them. They worked here for 4 months and they couldn't get housing. Driving from Portland and back is not, the gorge can be a tough drive. Certainly that we had our moment in the sun with them, and we couldn't stabilize. I think some of our outside applicants, we get a lot of outside traction from Colorado, East Coast. The reality sets in that they can't move. Also, becomes a lot of dead ends. So it's a challenge. I mean, I'm open to any suggestion. So
This is an issue a lot of well-paying jobs have been running into in the last few years, especially that the market has gotten, both rental and purchase has gotten so much worse.
And I think this is not an issue unique to Hood River. Government, particularly for highly professional and technical positions. Every city and state agency is struggling to fill those jobs.
Did you consider raising salaries in the budget or something like that to, would something like that combat
The issue, I think we've had some adjustments, but I think you're looking at pretty radical, like, I don't think it's an adjustment, I think it would be more of a radical makeover.
Yeah.
We have looked at some other opportunities such as relocation costs,
Yeah,
or other non-financial pieces that maybe we can entice.
and I have to imagine the contract services that you have to fill are not cheap compared to an FTE necessarily.
No, and we use them pretty lightly, because they, hour by hour, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, $250 for an hour of work from a trained professional. Is not uncommon. And the difficulty in getting, even if they're well-trained individuals, they're not necessarily well-trained in some of the nuance of our code. So we end up having to redo some of the work anyway. So it becomes really as a last resort for a spillover of, we're gonna miss a statutory deadline, and I need to get this out, and I'm willing to pay for it because we're gonna miss our numbers. And so it's definitely nothing that we don't rely on it. It's really a fallback position. And that's a lot of self-sacrifice from the staff to just get it done and to do what we can.
We reached out to any other cities, like as far as the staffing and other cities in our similar circumstance, and found any solutions that they've come up with, or is it just always unique?
We've all commiserated, but we have talked to some cities about like, what would it look like if we shared, you know, professionals, like as we look at possibly adding an HR person, like what would it look like if we shared with other agencies? I think most of the times we prefer to have somebody, we think that our workload is enough to have a full-time person ourselves, but I know, like, we were so lucky to hire Chris, but I know at least Cascade Locks is currently, they lost their finance director, they're currently billing that through contract services right now. The board recently hired a new finance director, yeah, we're open to creative ideas, but.
If we get approached by other cities to do that work too.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
that's.
I think that's more common, is they know we've done this, we've been here for a while, we have I think it was last year, between the three of us, we have 68 years of professional experience.
Oh, wow.
So we know what we're doing, and it's hard to fill that, but
That's right. We could look at those short-term rentals for the whole area. Everybody would love to offer that.
I've got a question, maybe it's more of a policy question than a budget one, but so the Port of Hood River is kind of undergoing the strategic kind of remake, right? Given the bridge and the financial consequences of that. They also own a lot of like high leverage, high visibility real estate, either developed or not, within city limits that they may need to sell or redevelop, or want to rezone as a consequence of all this stuff that they're going through. Have you contemplated what that may mean for you and your plan, given that you're dealing with the Heights, West Side? There's gonna be a lot going on over the next couple of years. That's a pretty big impact. Have you guys thought about this whole port situation and how that whole real estate, thing might impact your priorities and your very critical roadmap given a couple of years?
say, for example, some of those are pretty innocuous, but if lot one came in for a rezone,
Right.
I would most likely be trying to manufacture a third-party support and try to figure it out, because that would be a major bandwidth suck for the organization. Like I would have to most likely come back for a budget adjustment because of the gravity there. It has major interstate transportation impacts. Say, for example, they wanted to go to C2. They came back, we want to go to commercial 2, it pencils out, we'll have development because of it. I would be looking at an exit 63 interchange, major consulting analysis demand. I would be looking at an economic opportunities analysis demand on a comprehensive plan level. I'd be asking for, it would be a major impact. Like I'd be shuffling the top 5 critical projects, saying, with really, that would exhaust us.
It would kind of seem to me that this is not like a now thing over the next 3 weeks as we're finishing this budget, but as you guys get into the next fiscal year, those are conversations that should be occurring between the city and the port to understand. I don't think it's an if, it's a when that happens, so that gets mapped into your longer term roadmap, both from a policy and a financial standpoint, because it's, what I see as I'm at the waterfront every single day talking to these folks. It's going to happen in the next couple of years, and something that the city should be ready for.
Do you mean specifically lot 1 or?
No, just
variety of properties?
lot 1 is being, I think like exhibit A, but my understanding is that the likelihood of like some significant asset sales within city limits are, quite possible as a, how do we deal with the revenue issue? And with that may come, possibly controversial rezoning, rezoning requests, exactly, and a load on the policymakers in this room. So I think it's something that the city should get, let's talk to them before it happens, so we have a visibility and are not surprised. Yeah. And I'll have the same comment when we talk about parks, because I think it applies, similarly to parks and maintenance and all of that, public works.
In the building department, your ending fund balance down 95%, that by design?
No.
Okay.
It continue to, fund balance continues to run low. So the bar, actually, it takes almost the budget is pretty balanced. It just takes 95% of my carryover fund balance today. So hence my need of stabilization of expenditures. Again, the first revenue and key change in 2 decades. Our first 2 steps to getting that, call it right sized or right direction.
I'm looking at page 96, by the way. So we have enough for this budget, but then next year, if things are running the same status quo, I would imagine have a problem.
Yep, I think, so here's some of the tragedy of that is, there will be some cost savings to, the longer I cannot hire a building official. I mean, so that's staffing being a major component of the budget, 6%. I've been trying to hire someone for 6 months now, unsuccessfully. If that doesn't change, the budget will be better. The upside would be getting someone in that place helps me administratively work through some of the fees, work through the IGA, and help turn that up. But yeah, come next year, if the revenue's coming in the expenditures, that ratio remains, that will be, we'll have a significant discussion. The upside, the optimism, we have the number of large format commercial users on deck right now that have gone through the entitlement process, which would actually be really significant on a permitting side. We have a number of subdivisions that have gone through the project life cycle and will be transitioning into building this year. So we expect some upswing on the revenue side of home building and the hospitality sector, barring a recession.
Barring all the complications therein as well.
Yeah.
We increased fees this year in the current fee schedule.
Depending on the state.
Okay, but it was accounted for in this current budget.
June 26th, we anticipate a public hearing. So for the July 1st budget.
I thought you were saying 2026.
Okay.
Things before so the way you authorize some of the fees to move forward.
I guess, did we assume that we got approval for this?
They're built into this.
Okay, and so like if we have any fund balances as low as projected, we would just have to do a much bigger fee increase because this fund is self-sustaining.
There's only so much you will be able to just offset with fees, because there'll be a statutory limit. So the city has an opportunity to recommend it raise funds to a certain amount. The state will tell us whether the state has to give you ultimate approval on how much that is. So you couldn't just say, you know, it costs $400,000 to do our building. We're gonna have a $400,000 building permit fee. They will say, wait a minute, this is. They will expect a balance, but you can't just raise it to.
Right, but I guess more, I
Absolutely.
mean, given this is a self-contained fund, where would you get other revenue?
Oh, we would be asking for something. From someone,
From general. fund?
probably general.
Okay,
I mean, I think that's that would be the only option that we have. I mean, so you have general fund and everything else restricted,
well, yeah,
so.
This will also be an issue in the roads fund.
In the what?
In the roads fund, you know, roads is similar in that, you know, what I mean, so. I to Dustin's point, right, this is a big development year and revenue will increase. However, you know, if you'd be looking at sort of a record, right? Revenue intake, and you're looking at increasing, but you're taking sort of 20% just to sort of have the fund break even, right? So there's gonna have to be some sort of outside of this. And it will also be a very, very similar story with this.
So to put it in simpler terms, it's a restricted fund in that you can't profit from it, but you can prop it up.
Yeah, you're entitled to build reserves. So it's money that revenue generated in the building fund have to be reinvested.
Yeah.
So it's not a profit center that can fund roads or lease. It has to go back to building.
It can accept interfund transfers.
Except-
It can
except-
You can receive, but it
Yes.
cannot give.
Yes.
So the issue of this being dwindling is somewhat artificial and it's more your problem than necessarily your problem operationally.
honestly, it's.
It's
the
how-
use from-
Well.
If we operate this status quo as it is going forward, if we operate it the same, then we'll have to make up the difference somewhere
Totally.
else.
But only if we decide we should be operating this at a neutral level, which to me is a fairly arbitrary decision that's a decision to be made, your recommendation to be made by city professional management.
You know, the additional challenge, right, is that the governing resolution, you know, resolution 2020-07, calls for sort of one-time sort of sources to be used for one-time use, right? That also implies that it's sort of ongoing sources that are being used for ongoing uses, right? So the idea of just sort of propping this up through debt financing, right, or just sort of ongoing interfund transfers. You know, at some point in the longer, you know, middle to long term, there is going to have to be some sort of solution.
The question more for Chris.
Yeah.
If these numbers stay this way, how much room is there in the general fund in out years to address this? Because a week ago, we talked about the amount we have extra in those out years in the 3-year forecast. However, if we have this sort of situation continue ongoing, I would imagine that margin comes in pretty quick.
Yeah, no, I mean, as of right now, the general fund doesn't have a significant. So while it does have a significant balance, right, it doesn't have a significant surplus of operating funds.
Right. But that surplus would,
So there is no quick fix to this, right? And I would say, as far as what it means for longer term, you know, we're gonna have to look. You know, I will tell you what we did in the short term for roads is because we were gonna have this issue with roads this year. And Rich may be able to speak to this more next time. But with roads, we sort of looked at, you know, what is the resource allocation? Right? Where can we, you know, where can we lighten the load for what's actually being done at roads as far as what's being allocated to us? So I think part of that sort of looks at, you know, this, right? So for example, I don't know if it's feasible or not, but the third-party resources that are being loaded, right, in building, right? Does 100% of that go to building, or does that get shared among other departments that are benefiting from the development, right? I think that would be in a better position to support those type of that type of.
I think this year is really a study year for building, because it was in Public Works, and our finance director had it for a short time, and now I really appreciate Dustin taking a deep dive. The other piece of this, not just with revenue, but is also what are our costs, right? We are outsourcing to the county. We've had to outsource a lot in the past. What does it look like when we can bring some of those back inside and maybe a little bit more under our control? So it's definitely a study year for building, and hopefully we should be coming back with a little tighter plan.
Yeah, and I understand the level of work that we've expected of this particular department on
Yeah,
a number of things going forward.
I appreciate that.
On that up note, does anyone else have any great questions?
Thank you all for your time.
The chair had your back, like, no. Any other questions for? Thank you. Okay, next up is more general fund.
Okay. All right, there is right at the cover here, so I'll try to go fairly quickly through this. For the most part, there's not a ton to discuss. I will pause to if you have questions on any individual funds, you want to address that as we go through it, please feel free. Also sort of in between these breaks, talk about specific questions. So it's not to be confusing, fire, right, police, planning, those are all general fund departments. Building, as we just discussed, is a separate fund, right? The general fund also comprises other departments. These are the remainder of the non-enterprise, non-restricted funds. We covered this and discussed this a little bit at our last meeting. The general fund revenues and transfers is about $10.7 million in total revenues. Those are allocated across all of the departments. Of that 10.7 million, 7.8 million of the general fund program revenues fall into non-departmental. The non-departmental revenues is 7.8 million. As far as expenses, there are no salary allocations. So there is no personnel or salary that is within non-departmental. And when we talk about non-departmental, this is non-specific general fund revenues and expenses that are outside of any other department assignment. Right? So not assigned to police, not assigned to fire, planning, right, or any other individual departments. For materials and services, non-departmental carries about $100,000 materials and services budget. I'll go through what some of the details of those are. It also carries the cost of the safe route to schools. And it carries the general fund contingency for the full general fund. Of the $100,000 in materials and services, there is $50,000 that's being carried for the West Side URA formation costs. This is actually a carryover from the current fiscal year budget. This is also a cost. So the funds expended for this URA formation cost, plus the funds that were expended during the current fiscal year, would be recovered from the URA at foundation. At formation. There are some other larger programs, the nation's special programs that exist within non-departmental. An ongoing program is the city warming shelter. That's about $23,000 of annual cost. As I just mentioned, the safe route for schools. This was carried as a project within non-departmental. It is now just being a transfer from the non-departmental funds to the roads fund. Hood River Energy Council donation. It is currently in the budget at $15,000. That is a carryover from last year. The Hood River Energy Council has requested that donation be increased to $20,000. So that does not exist in the budget currently. It is going to be a proposed change when we talk about changes to the budget, as far as what's in the proposed budget.
If I could mention, it was $20,000 this year. It's continuing to be $20,000.
It was budgeted.
But it was budgeted incorrectly last year.
That's not an increase.
It's not an increase. Last year was an increase from the year before.
A new request that has come in since the proposed budget was circulated was the ODOT carbon reduction program. The $10,000 that will be proposed to budget within non-departmental is a 50%. I don't want to say carbon investment, but it's 50% sort of seed funding as a contribution towards a larger grant that would be sponsored by CAT. So this is the 50% matching funds along with CAT for an e-bike pilot program.
And that's one of the memos that's sitting at your table is a bit more explanation of that request.
The total grant on that is $200,000.
Right, that would be what would be received from ODOT.
Yep.
The local match is 20,000, but we're being asked to do.
So that is non-departmental. I'll stop if there's any questions here. And again, we can ask questions at the end. Parks. This is on page 42, 44. This is again, another general fund department. This is directed by Public Works. And Parks, this is primarily the maintenance and improvement of 23 acres of city parks. There is 1.6 FTE that is allocated towards the operations and maintenance of the parks. This is reduced by about 0.1 FTE for this budget year. And it's an overall salary expense reduction of about 15%. The park department carries a materials and services budget of about $487,000, a slight increase year over year of about 2%. And these are the larger costs that are in that materials and service budget. So contract for professional services, there's a contract with Crystal Greens for maintenance. That's a total of $141,500. That is a 79% allocation of a larger contract that's spread across several departments and funds. There is also $20,000 in tree trimming that exists under professional services. All the other operational expenses have just been adjusted to be consistent with historical spend or the existing contract terms. I will note there was an omission in the proposed budget. The Man Park Playground renovation, which exists in the 5-year capital plan and CIP, which is on page 136 of the book, the full 5-year plan, and the specific description of the Man Park is on 145. It will be presented that this be part of the parks. The parks capital outlay budget. It is not currently the proposed budget. Currently, it is in the CIP. It was an omission. So we propose as being part of it. I think there was a discussion of parks. Do you want to have that now or at the end?
Do it at the end.
Okay, great.
That's proposed for the general fund budget or for the parks reserve?
This is for the general fund.
Remember, this is Man Park moving up because the lines provides some funds.
City Council, another general fund department. This is meeting expenses and strategic initiatives that are outside any individual department. The total material and services budget for City Council is about $22,000. The only change for this year is $2,000 in operating supplies. And this was a request primarily for sort of tabling supplies. For sort of paraphernalia and sort of handouts for different city council events.
Chris,
Yeah,
this slide looks to me to be showing us what the change is for this item. Some previous slides weren't telling us about changes, they were telling us about the entire expense.
yes. So what I tried to do in most cases for the larger departments is at least show sort of where is the bulk of the material and services, right? For the city council, the full material and services budget is 22 grand. It's not significant, but this is a new addition, right? So the bulk of the change is in this operating supplies.
Thank you.
Engineering, which is page 50 to 51.
So this is the city utility infrastructure support, primarily civil engineering, other services, primarily as it relates to building review. This is also managed by the Public Works Department. There's 0.2 FTE of an allocated city engineer. That position is currently vacant, although I believe it will be filled shortly. Yeah. And so, so this department is the 0.2 FTE. For your benefit, the engineer is allocated between roads, engineering, sewer, and water. So that's sort of the full allocation of that one. So this department is primarily contract services with an engineer performing development review services. So the bulk of the 83% of the operating expenses is in this professional services, which is a contract with HBH consulting engineers and services. And again, there's no subsidy change. Municipal court. So municipal court processes and adjudicates citations and complaints issued by the City of Hood River Police Department. They have been very busy over this last year. There is one dedicated court clerk, which is a full FTE. There is a contract judge, and there is an assumed contract prosecutor position, although that position currently remains vacant. And so municipal court revenue is, and I want to focus on revenue for this because there's no substantive change on the expenses, but the municipal court revenue is budgeted at $233,000. That's a little bit of an increase over the previous fiscal year. We've actually seen a 28% increase from year over year, with the Q3 current fiscal year revenue being about $234,000 for the municipal court. The part of the reason is because at the beginning of the year they started with a aggressive collection program, and so it was sort of collecting a backlog of sort of fines and assessments. So where we're assuming that there's going to be more volume at the municipal court level, we're not calling for it to be as robust as this year. The last general fund department is parking. This is on page 54 to 56 of the budget book. So on parking, we're calling for a moderate revenue decrease from fiscal year 20. And the reason being is that we're currently forecasting that the current fiscal year revenues will be about 13% below what's in the fiscal 23 budget. However, for the coming fiscal year, we're looking at parking meter receipts specifically to return closer to pre-pandemic levels. And so the fiscal year 23 budget was $918,000. The fiscal 24 budget is $890,000 in revenue receipts. It would still be an 11.5% increase, what we expect to be the final fiscal 23 revenue receipts. So we are looking at aggressive revenue receipts, but not projected consistent with what was last year's budget projections. On the operating side, the parking program is more FTE heavy than some of these other departments. There's 3.7 FTE that are dedicated parking enforcement officers and customer service. So that covers the general fund. I will go to internal services funds next, but I wanted to pause for any general questions.
Any questions about those general funds?
So I'll ask the question on parks, looking at your longer term capital improvement plan, and again, like, sorry to be the waterfront or the port guy here, but I do, I'm super concerned about what's going to happen over the next couple of years with respect to the Port of Hood River and their ability to maintain these like lovely assets, community assets that they own and maintain currently, and they've made clear that they're going to need some partnership with some other agencies presumably the city or Parks and Rec. And I just want to make sure it's on the radar of everybody in this room, that for us to be able to maintain these beautiful community assets that we enjoy, and bring, all sorts of revenue to the city. There's gonna have to be some forward, future looking planning. Especially, parks being just is an obvious example of it, right? That's the port is struggling there already. And it's only gonna get tougher as they kind of wean themselves off of bridge revenue to subsidize their maintenance of those assets. So I think as you think about the following year and developing priorities and starting to think about, allocating future money, I'm sure that's going to come into play, and I encourage, folks here to really, work to get in front of that as much as possible, because I think it's significant. There's a lot of land and potential benefits, but also, associated costs.
I met with the port chair last week. We talked about this. Seems like in this budget, we're sort of at the not yet stage.
100%.
And going forward, it's,
Yeah.
and staff is in close contact.
Very
It's
close.
on the radar.
Great. Love
Thank
it.
you.
Okay.
I have a related question for parks. In the past, we talked about the inventory of parks that we have and creating a liability fund to deal with those parks should any of the equipment needs to be replaced, as we've done with Children's Park. From what I can tell, we haven't funded that in the past, but it's aside from a relatively small amount.
Yes.
Do we have a schedule of those liabilities in the future? And know when those liabilities are going to come up? So we can plan for that, or know how much we may need to set aside in the future for those things?
Yeah, I'll attempt to answer this question. I think this might be something that Rich covers next week.
Okay.
So there is just factually, there is a park reserve fund.
Yes.
There is not a mechanism to continue to fund, right? So there is not a department that is contributing sort of annual basis, right? Any additional proceeds to that reserve. So I'd say sort of step one is, should that be addressed, right? And then if that is to be addressed, then what would that be based on, right? And while there is a 5-year capital improvement program, I'm not aware, and I did not see for purposes of the budget, just a sort of a general maintenance schedule, other than the maintenance that is in the operating budget. So as far as, so I'll go to like the homeowner association model, right, where it's sort of every 20 years we're replacing the roof, and we reserve for it now, right?
Yep.
Things along those lines. My understanding is that does not currently exist today. The mechanism for it and the Park Reserve Fund does, the funding mechanism does not.
Beyond that funding mechanism, do we have a liability schedule or anything that says, hey, we're going to need to replace this piece of equipment at X years, similar like we do with the vehicle replacement fund? Do we have that schedule? And
I don't
Rich
know.
may ask.
I don't know.
Management, but I do think we have some asset management. We know when things were purchased. With the playground equipment specifically,
Yeah.
we have staff who is certified on playground inspection, so we have to inspect our playground.
But for purposes of the budget and for purposes of preserving, again, something I've not seen that schedule, does not mean it doesn't exist, just have not seen it in the context of it.
And then in the, which one was this one? Just the general fund, non-departmental.
Yes.
Couple questions. We have interest revenue in this budget of $200,000, which is up quite a bit.
Yeah.
What is that?
Okay, so I'm sorry, Monica, I'm very spot about this. I will tell you where the budget comes from, and then Monica will tell you why I misbudgeted. The city and its sort of investment funds holds about $24 million, which is the aggregate sort of commingled, right, pot funds that is holding. And so that was the number that I used to calculate the interest, and I assume that went to non-departmental. I don't know to what extent that should be allocated to other funds as opposed to non. So is that right? This is a test, but
Speak up to the microphone.
this is my test.
So that's correct. So the cash flow happens we book the interest and then allocate it to each fund. Quarterly.
Is this budget allocating everything here? Or is it allocated elsewhere to the other funds as we've done in the past?
Well, I will tell you that the extent there's a balance, right? So if your fund has a balance, then the interest should be about 1% of that assumed balance.
Sure.
Right, and so I may be double counting some interest revenue.
Yes,
That's
the
my
200,000 is excessive. Yes. Yeah, some of that will go to other funds.
So we'll have to adjust that.
And so in that, it sounds like you guys are looking into it because there are interest revenues listed in the other funds.
Yes,
Okay, so it
as
is,
a general rule of thumb, I try to use 1% of the beginning balance. Right, this was just me misunderstanding how non-departmental interest gets allocated.
that's fair.
So if the opening balance for non-departmental is 4.5 million.
Yeah.
All right, then it should be interest calculated off of that.
About 45. And the other question I had in that same category, you have TRT receipts up 11%. Is that truing up more with receipts that are seen plus 4 to 6% for next year?
So I'm sorry.
In the same,
Transient room tax.
yeah,
Yeah,
transit room tax, you have up 11%.
Mhm.
Is that 11% based on what you've seen from last year and then plus the 4 to 6% forecasted that you mentioned, or is that growth of 11% based on actuals already? What
No, so-
what actual growth
So
rate?
it's a little bit of both, right? And so you've got, so the base is higher, right? Because I'm assuming for transit room tax, I think we've like 1.9, and I'm assuming we come in at about 2.2. Right,
This year,
this year,
okay.
right? And so that was sort of the base, which I used to then escalate, I believe we said it was like 4.5 or 5% for this year.
Okay,
So
Yeah.
that'll get you to it.
if it's coming in at 2.2 this year, you have it budgeted at 2.2 for next year as well. Okay. Okay, and then have the last several months been relatively static in terms of receipts?
I've only, so the way that I do an estimate to close is I do a historical look back. So the information I had was as of Q3.
Yeah,
So
as of March,
right?
yeah.
So essentially I took what we received by March,
Mhm.
right? And then historically, what does that normally mean as far as a percentage of the year in balance?
Yeah.
Right? And so that's our project.
Was Q3 year over year static?
Q3 was stronger.
Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing for fiscal year 23, I think this was one of the slides from last week, so I'm gonna try to remember this, but from fiscal year 23, I think we're seeing overall 9% increase in transit lodging tax revenue received.
It's the sensitive fund. We have to make sure that our growth rates are there.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, of course. All right, so the next one is the internal services fund. This is on page 109.1. So we did talk about one of these funds, which was the admin fund. During the last budget conversation, but in general, these internal services funds are services that are internal to departments. The expenses of which are carried as a cost reimbursement in the individual funds and department budgets. So the first one we talked about was the administration, fund. This is what we said was generally consistent with what you would consider overhead, okay, as far as allocated overhead and then business setting. The allocated overhead from administration to the other departments and funds is about 1.44 million. And again, we cover this in detail. The next allocated fund, which is also a pretty significant allocation, is the fleet and large equipment fund. This allocates equipment replacement as a sort of set aside. So when we're talking on the police budget, as far as $177,000, that was the allocated cost. That is calculated out of
the overall fleet and large equipment fund, and then allocate it to individual departments based on what their specific replacement needs are projected to be. So police, fire, public works, all have their own unique allocation, right? Obviously, planning doesn't. Because it doesn't remind you there are no planning cars. And so again, this is I think the significant item we talk about here is because this is a reserve fund that is collecting reserves for high price assets. There's a significant balance as it's slowly developing these reserves. So the estimated beginning fund balance for the fleet is about 6.4 million. The allocated replacement charge is about 1 million. So in the interest of looking to utilize city revenue, city assets and resources to the benefit of other departments, this reserve also provides interfund loans. And so it was budgeted, there will be about $1 million, say $1.1 million and change interfund loans during this current fiscal year from the fleet reserve to other funds. We are projecting in this current budget that there will be an additional $2.6 million in interfund loans, 1.3 to sewer, a little under 1.3 to water. But again, trying to use the large capital balance in the fleet reserve in order to help fund other projects. And then I will just finally note, there is a schedule of what's being purchased this year. There are budget replacements of about $1.4 million, of which a portion of that is a carryover from the current fiscal year that were not purchased because of supply chain restrictions.
How does that money go back then? If it's an interfund loan, like how does the sewer and water repay that?
Yeah, so it's treated like any other debt. So it's just through debt service. So it is.
So the funds that they generate, basically, we give them $1 million, and during the year they collect $1 million, and it comes back into this fund.
Yeah, that's correct. In general, I think this is more than you probably need to know, but this is a short-term solution, right? Because these funds are needed eventually. The vehicles have most of the vehicles on our fleet replacement schedule have a useful life somewhere between 5 to 8 years, right? And so for the larger capital projects, the financing is traditionally either sort of bond or longer term debt financing that's more appropriate for the long-lived asset, right? Such as infrastructure. So the idea is primarily the replacement and the payback for these might very well just be more permanent type financing. Because this debt will have a shorter duration because it has to be repaid to the reserve fund so that it can be used to meet its requirements.
And the water and sewer funds will be paying back the loan with interest.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've assumed that these are 5-year loans with a 5% interest rate.
Okay.
The last answer on reserve funds is the compensated absences. This fund allocates compensated absences for the payout liabilities. There are a lot of assumptions that go into this fund. So the total estimated liability is currently $643,000. This year's allocation to all departments and funds is about $185,000 in allocated department charges. We targeted for this year 20% liability funding. And so this is more art than science. We were trying to estimate what we think the current liabilities would be and make sure that we collect adequate reserves for that, plus leave ourselves with ongoing balance. There have been in the past special allocations, right? When the reserve has been sort of pulled down beyond our budget, but this is sort of our best guess is where we are. And the other balance is trying to not make the allocation so high that it becomes sort of unnecessary burden. So for this year, we targeted a 20% liability funding, $185,000 in allocated department charges. I will note, this is another place
we will have to make a budget update. Because while we have the allocation and the funding of the fund in the budget, I've not included the estimate for payouts. And so I will add about $91,500 in estimated payouts from this fund.
And
And that would be a proposed budget.
that's like total payroll.
It would be in payroll. It shows up in payroll. Okay, that is the internal services fund. I'll stop here for any additional questions. The last is the restricted revenue funds. So this is page 92 to 108. I will note that building that custom covered exists in this restricted revenue fund. So I won't cover that here. I'll try to do this pretty quick. So these are the funds outside of building. They're on restricted revenue funds, local improvement district assessment. This is page 97 to 98. This is a pass-through reserve. So this is a local improvement district pass-through. The pass-through goes to Columbia Cascade Urban Renewal Agency. The next one is small grants, page 99 to 100. The balance that's in here is the balance of the Overlook Memorial Bridge Program. Currently, I just assumed that there was nothing coming out of the fund. I will propose that we throw in some miscellaneous expenditure so that if there are anything purchased out of this small grant fund, that is envisioned by the budget. But again, there's no additional revenue that's associated with going to this fund, and no additional funding. Chris. Yeah.
I don't know if it's Abigail or Chris, but I know we've been talking about for the Columbia Cascade Urban Renewal doing some wayfinding. Can we spend the wayfinding money in here and just get that off the books?
From which fund?
Oh, and not
The Oregon Community Foundation grant wayfinding sign remainder. Is it possible to just spend that this year if we're already doing wayfinding? And just be done with it, or?
I'll make a note.
Yeah, I think the only.
I don't know what the grant requirements are.
Yeah,
but
I don't know
I
the
would
grant.
love to, that's been here the entire time I've been here.
From-
Just a public way.
Yeah.
So the change I want to make here.
We'll cover that.
facilitate that.
Okay.
And then the question would be, does the sort of reserve fund rules allow? And so, but the change I would make here would allow those funds to be pulled out of this. The fire general obligation bond reserve, this is page 101 and 102. This was a reserve, I believe it was a debt service reserve that was required by the original general obligation bond that was fully paid in fiscal year 2022. There remains a residual balance of $115,000. And that is being transferred to the general fund, and this reserve fund will be closed. The last one is the tourist promotion, page 103 to 104. This is the 25% restricted portion of the collective TLT. Again, this is a 100% pass-through fund. Any money that's taken in through the TLT is passed through the River Chamber of Commerce. So there's no opening or ending balances. The last one are the construction access tax funds. This is on page 105. Right? So this is allocated. Oops, I'm sorry. This is the allocated construction excise tax to 3 separate funds. So there is the construction excise tax locally defined affordable program. This is on page 106. This of the 3 funds, this is the least restricted. And currently, the uses for this fund is to pay debt service on the 780 Ram Road purchase. So the construction excise tax portion that's being allocated for this fund is being used for scheduled debt service on Ram. Page 107
is the CET for Affordable Developer Initiatives. The proceeds, the proceeds in this fund can be used for affordable housing developer initiatives, such as paying in lieu fees, paying SDCs, or financing assistance. Where this fund may most likely be used is in satisfying some of the obligations that the city would have under its current purchase and sale agreement with community development partners for the Railroad development. And the last one is the construction and site tax subfund for the Department of Housing and Community Services, page 108. This is again 100% pass through. So any of the funds received, any of the CET funds received in this fund get 100% pass through the state. So. I'll stop there because this is our last of the reserve funds. Okay, we're almost there. The reserve funds. So this is accumulated reserves for multi-year accounts. There are 4 reserve funds that are established. Parking in lieu. This is the collection of in lieu fees from developers. There's no significant activities in here. The uses for this would generally be for machinery or equipment for parking. We're assuming about $15,000 in equipment purchases that come out of this thing. There's the Affordable Housing Reserve. So this is on page 127 and 128. I will discuss this for a little bit. So this is an additional reserve for affordable housing commitments. You will note that in this fund, there is the presumed sale of surplus property for $350,000. That was also assumed to occur in the last budget year. It did not, so it's been carried over to this budget. Again, this reserve would very likely be used in concert with obligations under the purchase and sale agreement for Ram Road with community development partners. So this would be part of the investment capital that the city would provide.
Do we need to budget more as contingency or something if that was gonna happen in this budget year,
Yeah.
or?
Um,
Because most of it's in ending fund balance.
yes, I mean, probably could assume it all gets spent this year. You know, it's the question of whether or not, but for flexibility purposes, it might be likely, given what will happen with community development partners if they get some financing. So probably should assume.
Okay.
I'll make that change. Or propose that change.
Well, do we have the money? Go
The Parks Facility Reserve, this we discussed a little bit prior. So this is the Parks Capital Improvement Fund. For purpose of this fund, there was the Collins Park, that was a program that was assumed to be funded under this fund during the current fiscal year, has now been pushed out under the capital improvement plan to fiscal year 2027. And so we're just assuming there's no activity in this fund for this current fiscal year. And then lastly is what is in the budget book and references the agency fund, but should be referred to as a fiduciary fund. And that's on pages 131 to 133. And these are the motor utility collections. And so currently, the city of Hood River processes collections and payment for sewer and water. There is proposed for fiscal year 24 that the city will also be collecting a new transportation utility fee that Mosher is levying that they are trying to water service pipe size. So that's just going to be an add to the water bill. There you go. So any other questions?
Any questions?
Thank you for staying away.
Is Graham still online? Does he have any questions? Or is he off? Any questions, Graham? No, good.
That looks very negative, Greg.
He's been talking at once. Well, with nothing else on our agenda, I call this meeting to a recess. Thanks.
Job, Joe. Can I get your